Welcome everybody. My name is Jack Miller. I'm the president of T3 Sixty, and we have Dean Cottrill here, our president of brokerage consulting and a senior vice president with the organization.
Hey, everybody.
Dean, we talked about this. We got on a call earlier today. Talked a little bit about our topic for today. Do you want to set it up, and then I'll
yeah. Thank you, Jack. And this is something that Tactical Tuesdays is something everyone's familiar with. We've been running this the last several Tuesdays, really to away with COVID-19 came about. We were thinking about what can we do as an organization to help broker owners out there to better deal with the challenges. This will be our fourth Tactical Tuesday, and we've brought in division heads for us in each one of our different areas within T3 Sixty to help give some insight into key areas to help everyone manage through this and do the best you can through these challenging times. Jack's on today. This is a really great topic, merger and acquisitions. We're seeing actually, and I just got off a call with a bunch of brokers, and we're seeing movement, agent movement out there, and even merger and acquisition discussions and movement as well. So this is our topic for today. It's talking about not only what we like to do is dive into not only how to survive challenging times like this, but frankly, how to see the opportunities that are in front of us and how to position yourself to thrive as we move through this challenge, and we also come out of it here in the near future. So today, merger and acquisitions, we're really happy to have Jack with us on the Tactical Tuesdays. Jack, as he just introduced himself, he's president and chief technology officer for us, expert at everything. And not very extremely knowledgeable in it so much. And so we've got an awesome topic, and I'm just going to turn it over to Jack, and we'll just do a little ham and egg going back and forth on merger and acquisitions.
That's great. So thank you for the introduction, Dean. And in my background, I'm coming into my 20th year in the industry, and I don't think you do work in the brokerage industry for that long without encountering merger acquisition. And then myself personally have had many clients on both sides of merger acquisitions through the brokerage consulting that I've personally been engaged with since 2005, and that the organization has been engaged with to some level for the last 6 years as we built our management consulting practice. So, I think this is it's a persistent topic. It's just part of how companies grow is using merger and acquisition strategy. And it's also part of how owners then retire out of the business or move on to their next opportunity, as they will sell their company or have their company folded in. So it's not something that's unique to the COVID situation we're in right now. It happens all the time. I do think there's some things about the situation that we're in that may open up some opportunities in a lot of different areas, including merger acquisition, but recruiting. People are open to conversations that they might not have been open to 6 months ago, 90 days ago, right? It's just life changes and you make different interpretations. So we're going to spend about 25 minutes to talk about this. Dean and I'll go back and forth. So we're going to talk first about merger acquisitions, and specifically we're going to focus on fold-ins. These first couple of a few slides and the talk is going to be a little bit more from the perspective of the buyer, so that you can understand how if you are a buyer, kind of what the parameters are, what you're looking for, how to think about it strategically. And if you are a seller, to help understand what the buyers are thinking, because it's a productive transaction for both parties. And if you understand both sides of it, then it's easier to navigate it. It's easier to think about it. You're more effective with it if you understand what's important to a person buying your company, and vice versa, what's important to a person that's selling their company to you, right? And I think there's a little overfocus, or a lot of overfocus on, what's my multiple? Is it, how much money do I get up front? All that kind of stuff. There's a little overfocus on that. So we're going to break that down and talk about it from kind of a realistic scenario situation, because there's a lot more than that in that conversation. We're going to talk about how to source candidates. So if you are on the acquiring side or on the buying side, where you should be looking right now. And by the way, these are good practices to be doing all the time. But right now, if you're not doing it, you can pick up and start with what we're going to suggest today. It's pretty straightforward. And then last thing, we're going to talk about how to know if you should consider selling. If you are on the side of, maybe I'm thinking about selling my company, This is just some of the thought process that will lead you through that we think it makes sense to have with yourself and with your team or whoever is also an owner with your company to know if you should be considering selling right now. So we'll talk about that. So the first piece we're going to jump into is well, what is a fold-in? So a fold-in, it's a little bit of a colloquial term used by the industry. It's generally used to refer to a smaller acquisition, one that is not a huge acquisition. Usually represents a larger or medium-sized firm folding in a smaller company into their brokerage. These deals are, while there's always maybe some cash involved, it's usually less about the cash. It's usually more about if you have a smaller company and the owner of that company looks at their situation and says, I'm carrying some leases, I have some liabilities that I don't want. Maybe I've lost some agents or my agents aren't as productive, or I don't think they're going to be as strong as they need to be to make it through this period of time. And I want out of those obligations, and maybe I want to focus more on selling and moving back into selling. And I've seen this personally. I've had clients personally in that situation where they've said, I've built a nice thing, it's good, but I made way more money as an agent and I'd like to do that again. And then they've done that. We've had companies that have worked with us even in the last 6 months go through this kind of a process. So it's usually less about the cash and more about the change in the opportunity and also the cost and liability reduction and getting out from under if you have some liabilities or some costs or some things that you're carrying. And I'll talk a little bit about this when we get on the other side and talk about whether you should consider to sell or not, because this cost and liability piece is an important conversation. Now, as an acquirer, as a buyer, I mean, these are the kinds of things you're looking at when you are approaching people that are potential sellers. It isn't just, could I pay some money or work out some sort of a deal, but what are the things that you're going to lift off of that seller that they don't have to worry about anymore? You're going to be able to potentially help them. They don't have to may not have to pay their staff anymore, and you might take their staff on. You might be able to pick up their leases, which could be an asset to you. It's a liability to them if you don't have an office in their territory. So the cost and liability reduction piece is big. What's that, Dean?
I was also going to say it could be a liability to the purchaser as well. That's something they have to add into the equation sometimes in those fold-ins.
Yeah, it's not always. Sometimes you are assuming the liability because you can carry it better than the company you're purchasing, and maybe it's more useful to you, right? Usually a fold-in involves some kind of advantaged comp structure for the broker owner that's coming over or their ownership team. Many cases, this looks like some broker owners that they were salespeople, they started a brokerage, they hired some staff, they brought on some agents, but they were still doing a lot of the sales themselves, or maybe they want to refocus on sales and that be their effort. So usually these fold-ins involve some kind of advantage comp structure over a period of time where they have much more sales incentive on their part because of that advantage comp structure. And the last piece I'll bring up is usually a fold-in is a contractual structured sort of payout where they're obligated to stay with your firm for a period of time. And that if they don't stay, then they owe some money back or they owe some portion of their commissions paid back. But it's usually set up that way. It's usually not a big check right up front and then we're done. It's usually maybe a small check or no check up front and a significantly advantaged comp structure for a period of time, thus enabling the broker owner selling to earn a lot more because of their sales. And that, again, reduces your cash out of pocket and your upfront risk in taking on the transaction. So any comments on the fold-in conversation?
A couple things. First off, entrepreneurs, one thing we find is a lot of the entrepreneurs who are the teams or very successful agents who move into the brokerage never think about, like most entrepreneurs who start businesses, don't think about at some point selling. So they're not mentally there. They're just like, I'm going to live and die in this position as I grow this. So that's one thing that some have to, when the small organizations, they hit that valley of death is how we call it, where they hit the valley of death, meaning if they take energy away from their own personal production to grow the brokerage, they lose the revenue coming in from the personal production. The ramp up for the new people they bring in doesn't go up fast enough to help them, and that's the valley of death. And then they go back and get their focus on their business. So they go up and down. These could be definitely people that you want to look at to focus on that are kind of in that valley of death to fold in. And realize this is all about a high percentage of entrepreneurs that run their own businesses that you might want to fold into your organizations. Ego is very big. So you've got to position yourself in these conversations that their ego is something that they'll typically run at a loss, meaning they could go out and be their own agent, their own team with another brokerage, but they like having their name on the sign. They like being that owner. And they'll frankly that's something that's worth something to them, that they'll actually take less money for that. So when you have these conversations, you have to position and understand ego is extremely strong. When you bring emotions, analytically looking at it, it makes complete sense for them to leave that and go and fold in because they're going to make a heck of a lot more money. Well, that's not the number one priority for them. It might be ego driven, things like that. So know that as you approach these fold-ins.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Dean, because we run into them all the time. There are small brokers that they're spending a fortune to support their brokerage when they could be making a fortune if they were focused on selling, but it is because of that attachment to its mind, right? It is that attachment. So yeah, I think that's a very important consideration. If you are looking at folding in a firm or bringing a firm in addition to that consideration of their ego and the kind of pride of ownership that they might have in their firm, some things to consider on the buyer side. The number one piece here is retention of agents, is making sure that if you are going to bring in a 10-person or 15-person or 20-person firm, that you have a plan in place to retain those agents. And that's actually a very good reason for having a structured payout over time or some kind of advantage comp structure in a contractual arrangement where the owner is going to remain with your firm for a period of time. Because when the previous owner comes over, becomes part of the company, and is still there, the agents that they originally had are much more likely to stick around because they'll see it as, okay, I followed this person went there, I'm going to stay with them. And so you're going to have higher retention of the agents in that kind of situation. But this is the criteria. Our industry, if you do a fold in or any kind of acquisition, you're not buying, a factory. You're buying a relationship or a set of relationships that people are then going to go out and sell under your brand or under your banner. And so retention, what you're buying is those relationships. And so preservation of those relationships is the most critically important thing, which brings me to the second important consideration, which is culture fit. It's really important that when you're looking at a fold in or looking at bringing on a firm, that there's a very strong alignment between the company cultures, where if you have strong alignment, then you're very likely to retain the agents that you bring over and that they'll be happy and might even see it as a significant enhancement because you may have more tools or systems or staff or things like that they would get to take advantage of. But you really got to look at that culture fit. Are you bringing in a company where the agents they have are going to play well with the ones you have and with the culture of the management and leadership? So super important piece. Next one is to be considerate of is strategic value. Many people will look at these fold-in opportunities or acquisition opportunities as ways of expanding into new markets. And one of my consulting clients from years and years ago was Compass's first acquisition in Washington, D.C. And I'd worked with that firm for several years on their strategy and building up their company. And that was a big part of the strategic value of that acquisition was that it got Compass out of New York and into the DC market. And so you want to look at it the same way. Where are there markets that by folding in a firm, you would gain a footprint that you could then take advantage of or leverage in order to grow in that market? And I think that's an important consideration. It's one worth thinking about as part of your strategy. Okay, so the next piece. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I love you. You love bringing that one up because
I do, because it was right in your backyard.
Yeah, it was my backyard, and I had number 1 or number 2 market share in almost every market in the Mid-Atlantic market right there. So that was, and a couple of thoughts on this is you want to kind of incorporate in your mind and your thinking breakage. Breakage equates to what you potentially could lose through a roll-in. So you look at it, you think you might make, X dollars, whatever those dollars are in company dollar from bringing them in. the breakage could be 20%, 30%, 40%, something like that. You want to be conservative. So, it might not be a full 100,000, say 100,000, just to make it easy math, coming and folding in. Well, it might be 70 or 60 because you could lose people, or you could.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's a very good point. Don't count on 100% retention going in. Even if you've got culture fit, even if the owner's going to come over and stick with you for a while, there's always some amount of breakage. So I think it's a very good point to the age of retention piece is to count on some loss there because it's inevitable. It could be just like, hey, if you're going to shut down this office that I've been in and I have to drive across town, I don't want to drive across town. It could be as simple as that. Hopefully not.
Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. And I think, and you hit a great point, and that's the idea of making sure that it's a payout over time.
Yeah.
I think that's very smart. It's very prudent. The other thing too to consider if you do something like that, which I encourage, is that you put like at the current number. So if it's 100,000 in the easy example that we're using, and you do breakage, if we get 70,000 coming in here, the offer will stay as it is. If we end up in a year or 2 years or 3 years over this payout, if we end up only getting 50,000 in that timeline, whatever that year is or whatever you guys break it up, then your payout's going to go down. But if it goes higher, if they produce at higher levels, then you actually get a bonus. You'll get more than what we've actually agreed to.
Yeah, when the owner has some skin in the game both ways, where if the production of the people they brought over affects their payout, boy, they're going to want to make sure that those agents are going to stick around and be happy. And if those agents do better, and that their payout can go up. So I think it's very smart about having that structured payout. Have some upside and some downside, so that the selling owner has some legitimate reason to make sure that it goes well and to keep investing in the team members that they did bring over. I think it's very smart to do that. Yeah, good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about where to find opportunities. And those of you that have been through the T3 Fellows program, have been through some of the recruiting material that Dean has trained on. Some of this is going to look very familiar because it's fundamentally not that different from recruiting. So first of all, you're going to find opportunities just like normal recruiting, which is through relationships. So building relationships with other broker owners in markets, right? And one of the higher order things that we try to encourage brokers to get into the habit of doing is once you can delegate enough of operational management and you've got other people and they're doing things, a broker owner's job or an executive's job is business development. And so setting up lunch meetings, making yourself known, getting to know other broker owners in the market, that is part of your recruiting. Once you're out of the recruiting, one, two, three agents at a time, where you move into true business development. So a lot of these opportunities are going to come from relationships. You may have some good relationships in the market right now where that conversation might be appropriate. And so I'm saying that where you have relationships, use them. Where you don't yet have relationships, start to build them. There's the Chinese proverb, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago or today, right? So either you've planted the tree years ago and you're ready and it's nice and big and providing you shade, or you plant it right now. So either way, it's about those relationships. Second piece is your personal business network. Letting your network know, the other professionals you do business with, know that you're looking for companies that might be interested in being folded in. And I think we don't do a good, I know I haven't in the past done a good job necessarily saying, these are things I'm looking for to people that I do business with all the time. And just bringing them current on our company. We think there's an opportunity right now for us to grow. We're looking for, like-minded real estate leaders who might want to join our organization, and we're open to acquiring them or folding them in or working out some kind of relationship there that will work for them. Because a lot of times they'll bring people to you. They'll bring people to you.
Think of this too, Jack. You might actually, a couple things come from this. You might find, there's software programs out there that, give you an idea of what's your 401k. I hate to bring that up right now with everything going with the stock market. And how much this is worth and how much that's worth. The idea of somebody, we'll take it as a compliment when you reach out. It's the idea of talking to them about folding them in potentially, because they're going to be like, you know what, maybe I'm interested in knowing what I would get at this point for my business. I'm intrigued by that. So tell me a little bit more so you can help through these contacts. Communication is just a way to get people open their ears a little bit. Say, let's talk more.
Yeah, you talk to anybody that's been an entrepreneur for long enough, and you hear the same thing. Well, everything's for sale at the right price, and you're the people you're interested in, they may want to know what your offer is. They probably do want to know what your offer is because they want to know what the market is, right? So it's not I don't see it as a negative conversation at all. I think it's a complimentary conversation. I think it's a positive conversation. And I think it's one that brokers on the sell side are very interested in. And if you're here and you're thinking about selling, you're probably very interested in what your company is worth or what what a different financial or compensation structure could look like for your team or whatever, however you want to do it. But there's some interest in knowing what your options are. And I think that's a persistent interest. I think you're right. Another way to find opportunities is to take a strategic or territory-based approach. Look at where you have market presence and where you want market presence. And that can be a good clue. I mean, you don't need a lot of pretense for this conversation. The pretense could be as simple as, we're in this part of the market. I see you're in that part of the market, and I'm really interested in that part of the market. Can we get together and talk about working something out? Or maybe there's a deal, right? And so it doesn't have to be more than that. That's plenty for a conversation, for a coffee, for whatever, to get the ball rolling and see if there is interest. But a strategic and territory-based approach, very smart, and also gives you potentially the launching platform into those markets if you can put it together. So and then lastly, I said MLS data approach. Looking at companies through any of the MLS tools like Teradata's Broker Metrics or any of the other market metrics tools that are available through your MLS. That's where you can spot brokerages that are potentially a fit for your strategy. And you can look at the sizes of brokerages, the kind of overall sales volume that they do. You can do your own kind of like, well, if they're doing that sales volume, here's what I would probably compensate for that in terms of company dollars. So on the back of a napkin, you can get a sense of what they are generating in terms of the company dollar and what it would be worth to you. And from there, you can go to formulating, which ones that you should be talking to. So I think that these approaches are all valid. There's a lot of other things that when we work in depth inside of some of our programs that we go into, but we think these are very fundamental, very approachable things you can go do now. Yep. So let's put on a different hat for a second and say, if you're on the other side of the transaction, should you sell your company? And what's the conversation to have about potentially selling your company? And I'll walk you through a little bit of some of the thinking behind that conversation. And I will add, I think that Dean, you made a very good point earlier about the ego involved with, maybe that's really important to you. And that's probably part of the consideration. But I'd say in considering selling, you got to set that aside for a minute and kind of look at the broader picture, look at where you are. So we'll talk about that for just a few minutes. So the first thing that you should consider, most likely, is to look at your year over year, how you did from March of 2019, through March of 2020. What was your 12-month rolling average? How did you do? Because the reality is that was probably for many, many, many brokers, the best 12-month period of time that they will have had for a while. Like we talked to a lot of brokers, and we've consistently heard some people are still having a pretty good April, like you said, Dean. So there may be some tail on that. But we know we're about to enter a recessionary environment. And so it is probably, I don't want to make a statement that has to be true everywhere, but probably in a lot of markets, it's going to be tough for a while. And so what you should look at is, if that's the best I was able to do in a really hot market, do I want to suffer through what's probably going to be 12 to 18 months of a slowdown, or 12 to 24 months of a slowdown, and in order to build back up again? And is that in my best interest to continue to pay the staff, to continue to pay my, all the expenses I have for running the brokerage? Is that in my best interest? Is that what I want to do? Or do I want to focus on, taking my sales team back and going and doing a lot of sales, or focus on something else? So there's just a very kind of financial nuts and bolts conversation where you say, if you just had what was probably your best sales year in a while, we've heard many brokers tell us that, very strong, right? And you're going to enter a period of slowdown because of your market dynamics, then do you want to tough it out through that, or do you want to just focus on selling right now and on getting back into sales or doing sales? So that's pretty applicable for the small companies. Larger companies have a little bit different calculus. Medium-sized companies have a little bit different calculus about this, and I get that. But for the smaller companies, I think very important. Look at those projections for the next 12 to 24 months. If you're in your market, you should reproject the rest of your year and reproject out 12 months and just see how the dollars and cents add up. Because there are many companies where if we continue to have a steep decline, it's going to be tough to pay the bills. It will be difficult, and it might be better to negotiate a deal now versus wait 6 months where the damage is already hit, where you've already spent a bunch of cash carrying staff or carrying whatever you needed to carry, and then you make a decision then. That's not the time to do it. The time to do it is now to make that decision if you are considering it. When you still have some cash in your pocket and still have some options open. Way better to make that decision now.
This does vary a lot, and as we've talked before, Jack, it varies a lot in where you're located around the country. So that's one thing. It's not consistent. It's not something we can say and give guidance straight across the board. This is what happens. This is what's going to happen. No, each market is unique.
It's super market dependent, and that's why you need to look in your own market and get a well-grounded sense of where you think your market is going to go. There are some markets that are likely to recover fairly quickly because of the demographics, because of the population inflow. I'm in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas has had 800 people a week moving here for the last decade. There's a tremendous amount of pent-up housing demand here. There's still people that want to buy, and still people in the income segments where they have money to buy. They haven't been laid off. They're working for tech companies from home. There's still business here. But there are other parts of the country where that's not true, where the income segments that are purchasing homes don't have any employment right now and may not have employment for a while. So you need to look at the particular, really focus on the employment dynamics in your market to understand how quickly your specific market is going to recover and how that will affect your transaction volume. And so that's just part of looking at that. But based on that projection, that's where you can make that call and say, if I know I'm going to be going through a tough stint and I know I'm going to burn through a lot of cash to keep the operation up and going, is it worth it to entertain this conversation now about selling versus waiting until I'm at the end of my rope, which is that's not the good time to sell. It's way better to sell when you still have money in the bank and you still have control. You still have, you're not in a moment of desperation. You're in a moment where you're pretty strong, but you know you're going into some headwinds. So that's the way to look at that. Definitely look at your current costs and your liabilities. What are the liabilities that you're carrying? What are you obligated for? If you have leases, if you have your staffing, if you have contracts that you sign for software, photocopiers, equipment, anything like that, this is where you want to do a review of those to really understand what that projection is going to look like through this period so that you can make sense of it. Then you probably do want to shop if you're on the potentially selling side. This is where you want to find out, this is where you want to take that call from a person who's saying, hey, I'm interested. Then yeah, tell me what you have to offer, right? So this is where you want to find out what the market will bear. There is no commodified market for real estate brokerages. So there's not like a stock trading floor where you can just look up the ticker price and you know what you're going to get. It's much more based around who's shopping in your local market or who's shopping from a national level trying to come into that local market and establish a foothold. So you really have to look at the particular opportunities, which takes a little bit of time, but is a good conversation because then you know I've got that company over there and that company over there. They're folding in or they're acquiring right now, and I know what they'll offer me. And so now you have that offer.
Yep.
Generally.
We operate.
What's that?
I was going to say, we do operate in that space. So if anybody has interest, we do have, Michelle, who runs our M&A division and does valuations and can help go to the market and find who in the market might be interested in talking or who might be interested in selling, depending on what side of the equation you're on.
And there are some of the larger strategic buyers that have indicated to us that for the right companies, they are interested in a conversation where we didn't think they were. We thought that they were not. And we've talked to them and said, no, for the right companies, we're interested. So even some of the bigger ones that have backed off a little bit, they're not off the hunt. They're just a little pickier right now, but they are still looking. So I'd say we're aware of that. So you want to know what your opportunities are. And like Dean said, we can give you evaluation. We can do a lot of things, help you with that. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. So you want to look at what your opportunities are and what it looks like. And you want to also look at your personal timing. I've found that there's the timing of the market, but then there's also the timing of the self. And it maybe your personal timing is such that where you want to focus more on something else right now, whether that is selling real estate right now or whether that is doing something else entirely. And for some people, it might be, I'm done, so it just depends on your personal timing as to where you find yourself on that spectrum and what matters to you right now, what is valuable in the sense of where you're going to be spending your time. And you can be spending your time, pulling through what might be a tough market in your market, could be. You could spend your time refocusing on past clients and people you worked with before and helping them transact real estate, making pretty good money doing that. You might want to spend your time doing something else and taking some time off and being done, right? So part of this is looking at your personal timing and how that meshes with the opportunity of the market. I will say there is, this is a, you know, there's a bit of a, I think people might have a negative narrative about selling their company and they feel like, well, I gave up. No, you didn't. You made a business decision about what was best for you, your family, maybe your spouse, and that's what it is. It's not a negative thing at all. And it's funny, in the tech space, they're much more open about this in the technology space. You don't even get into a conversation in the technology space. People know, what's your exit? What's your time frame? You know, who do you want to sell to? I mean, they're talking about that and they don't even have a product yet in the tech space. But I think we're in real estate, we're very tied up into our company being our identity, and it's such a personal service business that there's a lot of attachment to that. And what I can tell you is, even if you sell your company, you're still you. You're still the same person that everybody did business with and followed and did all the things. So don't let your ego override what can be a good decision for you. I will tell you, I've seen time and time again, there's a pattern where people go and they think about selling, they find out, they turn down all the opportunities, even some pretty good ones, because of their ego. And in another year or two, they realize they should have sold. And you can see it happens to the best of them. You know, it happens to the best companies. There's a lot of companies like that where you're like, Yahoo, why didn't you take the money? You should have taken the money. You know, like big companies have made this mistake. And individuals have made it too. And we've had those individuals. We've talked to them. We know them. They're people who've been through our programs or people that we've interacted with in the market. So, so let that go.
Your point 1 and 2 here, Jack, are really important. That coming off incredible year, the market's been incredible for the last 10 years. I mean, we've had a really great market, so it's something to look at and thinking projections, thinking in the future. So that's something to really weigh. If you're right there and your personal timing's your runway's getting close to the end of that runway of how long you want to do this, it's probably something really to consider at this time.
Yeah, because the market opportunity is market opportunity. It comes and goes. We're not in control of that. And you just need to look at it and say, now's a good time to sell. I had an asset that I sold a couple of years ago that was very similar to that, where I just saw the market was coming up for it. And I held on to this asset for 20 years. It was a domain name that I had for 20 years and had used it for a long time. And finally I said, you know what, it's time to let this thing go, because I think this is the timing in the marketplace is right. And I don't think I'm going to get any more by holding on to it any longer. So there's timing is very important in this game. So let's talk a little bit about getting help. Some things, if you are buying or selling, some areas where you're going to want to get help. You're going to want some financial and accounting help. Most broker owners have put a lot of things in their books for tax purposes, but often those things are not what the acquirer is getting from the transaction. They're not buying your car loan. They don't want any of that stuff. Then, there's things. So you have to have your books set up in a way that makes it easy for the acquirer to determine what are they getting, and then what are expenses that are below the line that you had in there for tax purposes. You want to get an updated valuation of your company. Again, we offer valuation services, but there are other firms that do it too. But you want an updated valuation to get a sense of what you might get in the market. You may need some help with market outreach. Some of this you can probably do yourself, but again, there's some companies you may not have an inroads into that company. Again, that's a service we provide, that we can help do market outreach and find people that are on both sides, that are either looking to sell or looking to buy. That's work we've done before. And lastly, negotiation support and help in negotiating through that transaction, through the terms and conditions. A lot of times, like I said earlier, people get real focused on the money and the multiple, but actually what usually ends up being more important, especially in these folding kind of transaction, are the terms and conditions of the deal. And because that's where your actual income shows up, because people aren't wanting to put a whole bunch of money up front. If they're going to give you a whole bunch of money up front, your multiple is going to be very small. So often that structured payout, it's better for both parties. It reduces risk for the buyer and the seller, creates potential more upside for the seller because of the time period. So you want to look at that. You may need some help and some negotiation support looking at that if that's not something you do every day. So those are just a few pieces on getting help. We may have some questions coming. I'm going to open the questions thing and see if we've got anything that we should discuss.
Yeah, we had something to chat earlier about culture, and pull it up here. It said from David, can you discuss how to best blend culture in a fold-in?
Yeah, so there's some really great resources on this about that I'll pull out and send some. I think there's still some of these copies available on Amazon. There's a book on merger acquisition that talks a lot about the culture, but the important point is to make it a win for everybody. Make this a win for the company that's being acquired. Make it a win for the company that's doing the acquiring. And really, it's what it is, and the way I think about it is, you found more real estate professionals that are a great fit for working together. And isn't that terrific? And if your own agents are a little nervous about you going and acquiring companies, market share is good. More signs in the yard is good. More market presence is good. It lifts the entire company. There's more transactions. There's more people seeing signs in marketing. So it's good. But you want to get everybody aligned that it's a great thing when two companies that have real estate professionals that are very professional and work well, get together and team up. Everybody loves that story. It's a great story. And you say, look, we found a company, they've got great people in it, and they want to team up with us, and we're going to grow, and they're going to grow, we're going to grow together. There's some tactical stuff too about communication in terms of communicating what's happening, when it's happening, setting expectations, having a really great onboarding plan for those agents you're bringing over. So in our fellows program, we talk about the onboarding plan. We do all this recruiting, but the recruiting is just to get people to that experience of the onboarding, right? And then if they have a great onboarding, they tell other people about it. Yeah, they did such a great job. They got me set up. They did a bunch of marketing for me. All that sort of thing. So having a strong onboarding program so that you have less breakage, higher retention, higher satisfaction, the agents you bring over, that onboarding piece is super important and should be a part of that. So that you get the benefit of those agents staying with your firm for that period that they need to. So those are just a few of the pieces. I will pull a link to, there's a book, like I said, that talks about some of the cultural aspects of merger acquisition, and it's got some good tips in it. And I'll make sure we get that circulated to the group. So
another thought too is I'll throw out is sometimes if you're bringing a nice, decent sized organization, or if you're filling strategically a market that you're not in, they could have a staff member that is very close to the agents that could be very beneficial in holding on to. You have to be very careful, do your due diligence, do your homework, make sure that staff person's competent and going to be doing good work for you. But sometimes agents have stronger connections with staff than they do with the owner. So you want to do some investigation there, and that could be somewhere where you can complement by bringing one of the staff members in. If you have an influx of enough agents, enough production, you're probably going to need an additional staff member potentially to take care of that. So that's something to consider to help. The other piece on culture is if you have the agent advisory committee or anything like that going on, which we advise and encourage, that's where you get some of the new agents coming in, put them on the advisory committee, let them know they're respected. They're going to be part of the groups that help make decisions for the company, things like that. So integrate them as quickly as you can into a lot of the different things that you've got going on.
Yeah, especially right now, the personal outreach that we've seen broker owners do with their own agents, extend that to the agents you're bringing into your firm, because that's where they're going to feel part of the family. You want them to feel like they're part of it. And so that personal outreach, especially right now, goes a long way, because a lot of people are not, they may not be getting enough of that. And that would be good for them to feel, but integrate them socially. When we can all get together again, that's going to be great. It's a little challenging right now, but whatever you're doing for your team to keep your team together, you do it with all the new agents coming in, and you make an extra effort to reach out to them and make sure they have a great transition, that they come over, that their challenges are overcome, that their needs are met. That's how you're going to do it. And if they have a great experience in that process, other people are going to ask them, how did it go? And you want them to say great things. You want to say, you know what, they really took great care of me. I feel like I'm in a better place. That's the end result you're shooting for in those transitions. So
the people you really want to have strong connections to on a personal level, you really want to go break bread with them. Something that someone I used to work with said, break bread, go spend time with them at dinner. Once we can start doing this, when restaurants open up and we can start seeing each other, but those personal connections and that time away from business kind of connect on a personal level are so important to just life in general, in relationships, let alone business relationships.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts about that. We could almost do a whole webinar about what I've learned about personal social connecting in the time of COVID, because of some of the things I've done personally just to stay connected to people that I care about and want to be involved with. So, but yeah, there's some use all those tactics. If you're doing weekly Zooms, if you're doing pizza parties over Zoom, If you're doing a happy hour Zoom,
Happy hour, great.
make sure they're invited. Make sure they feel welcomed and special. So great. So I think that's it for today. I'm going to pull up. We've got a little bit of just for those of you that have been on this series.
Housekeeping.
Yeah, a little housekeeping. Dean, you want to talk about next week and what we're doing?
So, yeah, next week we're going to continue our Tactical Tuesdays. So we're going to have Clint with us. Clint runs, he's our T3 Sixty's Vice President of Associations and MLS Consulting. We're going to talk about leveraging your MLS and associations to best help us. Chris just posted in our chat window how to sign up for that. We're going to have the fireside chat coming up. We also have a great website. We have a great website, prepare.t360.com, that you'll see we've actually built this. We put everything on there from Tactical Tuesdays to fireside chats to other really good information in there. So I encourage you to go to that site. You can get a lot of information of everything that we've been doing. You'll see recordings of prior Tactical Tuesdays and Friday fireside chats there as well. If you have questions leading up to any of our Tactical Tuesdays, feel free to send them to Shannon at t360.com.
Yeah, and we've got some great topics coming up in May. We've had a lot of brokers ask for questions around, help with technology, help with looking at their accounting, there's a lot of things there. So we're putting together some special Tactical Tuesdays for the group in May. And then I'll tell you, we're also doing some additional things to help broker owners at this time and real estate leaders at this time. One of our consultants, we've put her on the phone for free consultations. She's doing 7 to 10 consultations a week on any number of topics: finance, kind of your personal mental well-being as a leader, staffing, personnel, brokerage operations, changes you need to make. She's been in brokerage operations before, and I've worked with her in brokerage and franchise before. It's Kelly White who's doing that. Just go to t360.com/ask and you can schedule a free 30-minute consultation. Stefan and the rest of the consulting team, we wanted to show up and be of help to the industry right now. We couldn't think of a better way to do it than to put one of our team members on the phone for anybody to have that conversation, whether it's brainstorming, figuring something out, shoulder to cry on, whatever you need, we've got it for you. So that's that.
Awesome. Good stuff.
Great.
Right.
So I think that wraps it up, Dean.
Yeah, wrap it up. And Ken sent us a message, Ken Cornell. Ken, thanks for reaching out and letting us know that what you heard today was great. I hope everybody else took some good information from today. We're here to help. Please reach out. You can reach out to me, Dean at t360.com, Jack at t360.com, and also questions and Shannon's help. There's Shannon waving, Shannon at t360.com. So if we can help you guys in any way, please reach out. We're here to help support you through this time and frankly, any time, but especially now. So be safe, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Stay safe, stay healthy.
See you. Bye-bye.